Okay, so we're going to take a more lighthearted turn and talk about plants today. Our last episode was pretty heavy, weighty issue, talking about fake meat and meat in general. And today we're going to talk about trees, because trees are, I don't know, they're just the comedy relief. So I hope you are excited, not just trees, but perennials, to talk about those plants that might serve you well and might, really give you a good turnaround in terms of investment. Get these in the ground, they'll get growing for you, and you'll do a little work and get a lot of return. All right. So this is one of my favorite topics. And Drew's like, well, this doesn't have to be a long podcast. So I have no plans. I'm not committing to long or short. But today we're going to talk about, and I'll just list off and you can listen as we go through each one individually. But we're going to go through mulberry, pawpaws, yopons, mullein, self-heal, beautyberries, chokeberries, hibiscus, hazelnut, and Navajo blackberries. So this was just my top 10, like immediately came to my mind as ones I wanted to talk and share with you about. We've already done plant podcasts before. So, our top 10 list, our top 3 list, at least we've gone over, I think elderberry, comfrey, and I might be forgetting one, but these are right now what's, what we're,
I feel like these are like Southeastern native plants that everybody should have on their homestead.
Everybody should have. Or at least, even if you don't live on a homestead, you should be able to go to like the nature preserves and find these.
Or if you don't live on a homestead, have them in pots on your porch.
And if you don't have a porch, go to the park and find them. Anyway. All right. So we'll start at the very top. So mulberry is number 1. And so mulberries, fortunately, we planted a lot of these when we first started, not knowing whether we like mulberries or not. And we're very medium about mulberries as a fruit, I think. Like, they're not a staple for us. I'm not going to freeze tons and tons of mulberries because they
do not freeze well.
They're not my favorite frozen berry. I saw somebody posted a recipe for a mulberry like pie the other day, and they're a chef, and they said it was hands down one of the best pies they'd ever made, which I'm trying to envision how that worked. And maybe I'll follow his recipe. He's a foraging chef, so I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. But
if you could get the seeds out of them, it would be good. I just don't know.
With the stems, when you pick them, the stems kind of come with them. So you're sort of left having to de-stem each one individually, which is challenging. But I will say the trees themselves are magnificent. The berries, Abraham will come back covered in berry juice. So don't get me wrong. People love mulberries. And we have white mulberries, and we have, I don't know if they're black or purple. They're purple, but I'm not sure what the variety is.
I think they're black. The biggest one we have is called like Queen Jewel mulberry, something like that.
And the cool thing is, like, the one blueberry or mulberry that we planted is a full-fledged tree now. We put it in probably year 1 when we moved here, and I might not like love the location. I think when we started,
we get that big.
Oh my gosh! And I have a friend who has a mulberry tree that's 20 times as big as that one.
Yeah, I know.
So they can get massive. So be aware of that. This one has turned into a full-fledged tree, and it did it very rapidly. So, and it's funny, we planted a whole row, we call it mulberry row, and along the pond's edge for a couple of reasons. One is it was sort of where the fence is. So we knew that the mulberries would fall into where we were keeping animals. And so that was a perk because the animals love the mulberries. We keep chickens in there. We've kept turkeys in there. We've kept all kinds of livestock in there.
The other plan was we would drive the chicken tractor down one side of the row, and then turn around and come back the other, and the chickens would then be able to like eat the mulberries off the ground as we moved them. Yeah. Which we ended up not doing that because we got more property and didn't have to keep the chickens right there. Chickens by the pond it just doesn't fit our system anymore. Yeah. But it's still beautiful down there.
But the other reason was it was by the pond, so we knew that the roots wouldn't have to go too deep, and they'd have access to water pretty sustainably. So, and that seems to have worked.
Yeah, and I did not know when we planted them, but it's great forage for cows and sheep, and And then like medicinally speaking, I mean, there's just like an insane amount of things that you can do with mulberries. There's one mulberry that I still want. It's like a Middle Eastern one.
Oh, neat.
And it's like the mulberries are like bigger than your thumb. I mean, they're like massive. I think it's a Lebanon mulberry.
Interesting.
I don't know. Every once in a while I see it in a catalog.
Well, and they're fairly drought tolerant. It's interesting. It's one of Thomas Jefferson's favorite plants. If you've ever been to Monticello, or he actually has another property that he built that's like mini Monticello. I think it's called Poplar Grove in Virginia. And they both are surrounded by mulberries. He just thought they were the most magnificent tree. And so they have these mulberry lanes all over those properties. But yeah, I mean, also in Israel, when we went to Israel, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
So they're pretty, they're just pretty easy. And they're kind of a beautiful tree. I mean, the shape of them is really nice. If you're thinking about planting something like a Bradford pear, I would say this is a much better alternative. Just knowing, though, that it can get over the course of, 20 years or so, much, much larger.
I think you could prune it back. I've thought about
well, we have to. So that's the other benefit is you can coppice it and use the branches for things.
Yeah. And one year we went in and like almost cut it in half and it like recovered in a year.
Very quickly. So mulberry, top of the list. If you don't have any, get some. They'll grow pretty rapidly and they're a great thing to have. The next on the list is pawpaw.
I'm not sure why that made the list.
Well, because it's fun. Somebody said yesterday, they're like, oh, it's my best friend. She was like, I've heard about pawpaws as a really great thing. Have you ever heard of pawpaws? I was like, yeah, we have like 15 of them growing. And we have I think the first year we moved out here, we were looking up, natives and what can we start? And pawpaws were high on the list because they're native and they have this really mysterious fruit that if you haven't had.
Still not had grown on our property.
Well, we're growing. So what we had to do is a friend of ours has some pretty massive pawpaw trees. I think they were on his property when he moved in. So they're great, but you have to cross pollinate a lot because we don't have a lot of the flies, the pollinators that do the job. It's hard to get them to come to the tree. So there often are a lot of pawpaw trees around even, but hard to find ones with fruit. But the fruit is insanely good. It's not shelf stable at all. This is why we don't see it in grocery stores, but you cut it in half. It's got these big fat seeds in it. And the seeds are in this like soupy custard, like kind of like a mushy banana.
Yeah. It's like a banana and a pear and a pineapple.
Mushed up together and delicious.
Mango, kind of a little hint of mango.
So sweet. It's just like so sweet. I'm sure if like agriculturally speaking, if they could come up with a way to mass produce pawpaws, they would, simply for the fact that I'm sure they could make an incredible sugar substitute out of it. But
so I was talking, there's somebody in our area that has them and grows different cultivars that are more consistent and grow like better fruit. So there is like some development happening. I wouldn't say on a commercial level, but I didn't realize this when we got ours. Like the wild ones are kind of, which is what we have, are like kind of, I mean, makes sense now, but I didn't know there was an alternative to the wild ones. I guess what I'm saying is they're just kind of like inconsistent. You might get some fruits here or there, but if you get these like kind of more domesticated varieties, you can get
maybe like a wild persimmon, native persimmon versus like one of those Fuyu persimmon trees.
Yeah, or like a regular apple tree versus like a
crab apple.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they're cool. They do grow very slowly. And then I think once they get comfortable, they start to take off. So we're starting to see that now. Some of the trees we started are still not more than 3 feet tall. But they are starting to like every year double in size. So those are great. I think that it's exciting to have those kinds of native sort of heritage plants. And then the next is yaupon. So yaupon is spelled Yaupon. And this is a native grower.
I never know how to spell it.
Well, if you're looking it up, it's kind of a weird name. But it is a native sort of bushy plant that can get larger, evergreen, small, teeny tiny little dark green leaves. You've probably seen it and you didn't realize it. It looks a lot like maybe an ornamental shrub or something. And you probably could even grow it in that way. But the leaves are actually caffeinated, so you can use it as tea. It was a native caffeinated tree or plant that when the early settlers arrived, they were trying to find an alternative to English tea, obviously, or tea coming even because English tea comes from China. I don't think there's caffeinated trees native in England.
Right. Yeah.
But, we didn't want everything to rely on England for everything. So started using it, and then it got the scientific name, Vomitec something.
It's Alexia vomitoria.
Oh, well done.
Probably that's it. I don't know.
Wait, you just made that up?
It's something very similar to that.
Oh my God. I'm working on knowing scientific names, and I even thought, I should write them down on here before we get started. But, I didn't. But a lot of people, the like folklore around that is that the English called it that so that American settlers would not think it was edible or useful. But it is highly useful. So
we still got them.
And there is a lot of there are some people doing a lot of research on Yopon and how to enhance caffeination and make it in the best tea format and that kind of thing. So, but a fun one to have around, especially if you like tea.
Did you say it's an evergreen also?
I believe so.
I feel like that's another really good. I think it makes a good screening plant. Like if you need something to screen out the neighbors or the neighbor's shed. Yeah. That's why we have a bunch of sheds, neighbor sheds, and I'm always like, what can I put there so I don't have to look at the backside of their shed?
Yeah. And there's always, on a border, you usually want to have some privacy put up. Anyway. Right. I wouldn't say it's super fast growing though. So and it can get tall, but I think it looks a little scraggly once it's tall. So it might not be the best solution. Mullein is on the list, and mullein is something that a lot of people ask me for mullein plants. And I mean, I think you can probably grow it like that in a seed tray. And I'm trying. I gathered the seeds and I'm giving it a go just to see. And get more growing. But we have so much sort of randomly growing on our property here. And thankfully we have that property in Sparta, and a lot of these things grow natively there as well. And so there's a ton of mullein, which I think grows even better up there.
It seems like it. That one whole hillside is just mullein.
It really likes to grow on hillsides.
Mullein, I think because it has the deep taproot. I'm assuming it has a deep taproot.
I generally think that any plant, its root or is as deep as high as it goes. It has to be.
Yeah, it seems like it really likes erosion areas.
Yeah, it does.
Which makes me think it has a deep taproot.
Disturbed areas. Yeah. And it's a biennial, so it flowers every other year. So you might see the beautiful spiral fuzzy leaves one year. And then the next year you'll see a 5 foot, 6 foot tall flower head spike out of the middle of it. And all parts of that plant can be used. We use the leaves. We actually Drew will smoke them in a pipe. I make a tincture, and the flowers can be used as well. So the mullein leaf is especially good for lung conditions. So asthma, breathing conditions. So we keep it on hand for that.
Which it feels very counterintuitive when you're having asthma-like symptoms to breathe in smoke, but it's amazing how much of a difference it makes.
Of an instant, sort of like a nebulizer, right? And then the flowers are really good for earaches. So you can make an oil out of it's called mullein oil. So I think just we've gone to a lot of homestead consults, and I would say the majority of the people who aren't familiar with their land will walk around and will find mullein. So it's a cool one to find and know that you can use. Self-heal I put on the list because that's another one that people will often find. It's usually right there beneath them. And that is in the category of plantain, chicory, self-heal, dandelion. Those are all, if you own any property in the United States, you'll probably find those plants growing. So just become attuned and find them and use them. So self-heal is called self-heal or heal all. It's got a lot of names. It has this really pretty little purple flower on it, and the leaves are very distinctive. I don't know why, because once you know what you're looking at, you're like, oh, look at all the self-heal. You'll just be able to identify it from the leaves. And I don't know why, because they're very traditional, oblong shape, but there's something about it that just has a very unique characteristic, at least to me. And you can use the flowers, you can use the leaves, and you can make salves and balms and things. It's great for wound care and skin care. So that's a fun one to have around and really pretty. And then the next I put on beautyberry. So beautyberry is a native, and it's really fun to come across it in the wild. And the berries really are just really beautiful.
Are they edible?
They are. Yeah, you can make jams and jellies out of them. I don't think they're like tasty right off the bush. And we actually planted 2, and they were going really strong and looking great. And then the power line company came along and sprayed.
Yeah.
Which we've since, and we've even done a podcast about this, but we've since told the power company that we run an organic farm and they cannot come out here and spray. And so we even have signs hung up and everything. And they gave us money back for that. But, there's nothing like a thriving plant. I'd rather have my thriving plants back. And we have planted more, but they're taking a little while to get going. But yeah, you can find those. And like everything, if you can find it in the wild and sort of nurture it there, it'll do so much better than anything you try to, stick in the ground, because it knows where it should be. And
yeah,
we try our best, but we're not always great at finding the best place for things to go. Next on the list is chokeberry, otherwise known as aronia. And it actually is, I feel like it's kind of an underdog. I don't know why people don't talk about it more.
I feel like it's the name.
The chokeberry?
Yeah,
well,
and the taste.
They're terrible. They taste terrible.
I know why I got that name, because like the other day I was like, I'm going to try one of these. Yeah. I was like, never again. But that's probably about the 4th time I've tried one. I feel like
you got to try them every year.
Yeah.
Maybe they're better this year. They're not. They're always the same. They do, I think, often get confused with pokeberry, just like elderberry does. And they are 3 very different plants. Chokeberry it's little berries. So on a elderberry, you have those umbels of flowers that face up towards the sun. Chokeberry is the opposite. They face down, and the berries are larger, and they kind of hang down from where they're
almost like little mini cherries.
Yeah, definitely more like a cherry than in like an elderberry.
What I didn't know about aronia, and especially you can tell because of where we planted it, is that it is like a shade lover. Like it's an understory. Mm-hmm. It doesn't on our property, we have it planted in like full sun. Full sun. It's making it.
Well, here's what I will say. And this is like, I mean, I might say this in every other podcast, but the deer fence has made all the difference. So we put in this deer fence this year, and everything that we planted 10 years ago is suddenly like, oh, look,
yeah,
it's still there, And I would say the same is very true of the chokeberry. It's suddenly 7 feet tall. It suddenly had enough berries on it for me to pick and make a syrup. But the cool thing about chokeberry is it's higher in vitamin C and a lot of other nutrients than even elderberry. So, elderberry syrup has become this craze, and I'm wondering why chokeberry hasn't followed suit.
The name. It's marketing.
What's in a name? Anyway, it's marketing. But it's also super high in tannin, so it is very kind of like dries your mouth out. But yeah, it's a great plant to grow. It does grow in the understory, so you could plant it in a shady area.
It'd be great for like an apple tree guild. Like if you just plant it under an apple tree, it would thrive. I think it's also a great forage. The cows love to eat it. Like now that it's gotten taller, I let them kind of nip down low on it, and it bounces. What's cool about it is it bounces right back, so it can take.
They really only eat the leaves,
right? Yeah.
So then the leaves reproduce.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the list is hibiscus. So there's like, I think 185 or 85 something high amounts or different kinds of hibiscus. A lot of people are familiar with hibiscus tea. Generally, that's made from roselle, which is an annual in our area. It's native to like the Caribbean or something, but it makes a delicious deep red tea that I think it can also be used to make a dye, I want to say. But it is, annual. So you have to start it from seed every year. There are a lot of native hibiscus that will grow back year after year after year. And a lot of them will particularly grow in areas that are not useful for much else. Marshy areas, hillsides, ditches and dips and whatnot. They die back almost completely to the ground every year. And then they still manage to grow back taller again the next year. So, and they make the most beautiful flowers, just big, open, like moon-shaped flowers, sort of like a moonflower, but they're just glorious. So pollinators adore them, as do hummingbirds and lots of other birds. So I highly encourage you to plant those, especially along the edges. Because again, I think any perennial is better than like 10 annuals.
Oh. I wonder if there's people that are like annual lovers that are like, no. They're really like impatience.
I just can't listen to this anymore. This nonsense.
Yeah. Stop.
Well, I mean, it's not a great cut flower. It's not like something that you would pick and put on your kitchen. I mean, maybe you could.
I feel like the flowers are beautiful.
Oh, no, they're beautiful. I think they don't last long as cut flowers.
You're saying better than a zinnia, better than Cosmo.
It depends on your goals. Context. Anyway, okay, so next on the list is hazelnut, which this one is ironic because I'm going to complain about it. We have to give the pros and the cons, right? So hazelnuts we've grown, I would say it was one of the blueberries, hazelnuts, apples, and a few other random things. Chestnuts. We've tried a ton of chestnuts. In the first 10 years, or our first year, maybe first or second year, we probably planted about $2,000 to $3,000 worth of those things. Of
all the different plants together.
Yeah. Not of each, all of that together. And we still have a ton of hazelnuts. And I'm going to clarify, we have a ton of hazelnut bushes.
They're prolific growers.
Oh yeah, they're growing like crazy. They're great.
If you have like a crafty 7-year-old that wants to make everything out of little wee branches, hazelnut is a must-have.
And for gardening, it's tremendous because you can make really great trellises and teepees for your garden.
What I really want to do is make a hazelnut hedge, like the old English style, where you like bend them over in like hoops, and then every year you bend them over.
Did they do that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh yeah.
Well, we have a hazelnut hedge.
I know, but it's not bent. I don't know if it's too late. I think it's too late. You can cut.
Oh yeah, you can just cut all of them back, and they'll just keep growing.
So you like take it. So then it looks like hoops, like half circles over and over, and then all of those grow up, and that's your hedge.
Huh.
I want to do that.
Well, have at it. So
after this, that's where I'm headed.
Our hazelnuts have never really produced many actual hazelnuts. We've gotten like maybe 3 or 4 over the course of the last 6 years.
We don't know for sure because they do hide, and I feel like the squirrels. My theory is the squirrels get.
No, that's not the case because I know what the flowers look like, and I have searched like crazy for the flowers, and I've seen maybe 3 or 4.
Abraham found one yesterday.
He did find a hazelnut yesterday. So he was very excited. It was cause for celebration because we have these giant bushes that don't make any hazelnuts. So I know a lot of people will talk about, I'm starting a permaculture homestead. I'm going to get a bunch of hazelnuts and get them. Feel free. Maybe it's just our soil. I don't know. But we have them planted in many different locations and none of them are making actual hazelnuts. So
I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that have planted a lot of hazelnuts and they do get hazelnuts. So I would not let our experience stop you. Maybe a slight warning. We need like a hazelnut expert. To come out and assess our hazelnuts.
I've filed this complaint with everyone I can think to file it with, and no one has given me any good enlightenments. But
I'm gonna call Jeff Lawton.
Okay,
Jeff,
have him on. Let's talk hazelnuts. I'm gonna call you out because this was your idea. But they are, it's fun, and also the English word for hazelnuts is filbert, so I feel like that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last on the list, Navajo blackberries. So I posted a picture recently of our blackberries, and we are getting about 1 pound to 2 pounds a day from and we don't have very many because half of them died. We've got some coming back in, but they just produce and produce and produce the most beautiful, giant, delicious blackberries. And they're thornless also. And our method of growing is super fun. So we bent over a cattle panel and we have them planted on either side of that hoop. And it's just the nicest thing. Even when it's super hot out, you can go out there and you can kind of stand a little bit in the shade and pick these blackberries.
Well, as they ripen, the blackberries like fall down inside the arc. So yeah, when the whole arc is covered in blackberry vines, you can be out there like today in the shade picking blackberries, and it's like, man, this is genius.
Cool and relaxing.
Why would you do this any other way?
Why would you do it any other way? But I mean, I think the only downside is that they are completely bombarded by Japanese beetles and June bugs right now. So that's I just go out and I shake the whole cattle panel and hope most of them don't fall on my face when I'm picking blackberries.
It's like a shower of Japanese beetles.
Which is pretty nasty.
And the birds, it's very difficult to get a bird netting over the arc. So
yeah, but it grows so many. Yeah, I'm not even worried about it.
If you don't want to share, some people like to bird net everything.
Yeah, but we've already made blackberry jam and blackberry cobbler and blackberry, you name it. It's blackberry season at our house. So yeah, I don't know. I just felt like it was time to talk plants and give you guys some ideas about things that you should be doing on your homesteads if you're not already. And natives also that you can look for potentially that might already be there without you having done anything. There won't be Navajo blackberries, I don't think. But they do grow super well.
I don't know what the variety is called. It's the wild variety.
Wild blackberries.
It's like Satan's blackberry or something. The ones that grow out of the shoe.
For every 18 thorns, you get one good berry.
And they're barbed, so you can't get your finger out. But yeah, I think that's a fun list. So go find all those plants. If they're not growing, grow them. Tell your friends about them. Tell your friends to listen to this podcast. And thanks for listening.